Okay, so hi everybody. I am Wendy Silvers. Welcome, welcome today to my live interview with a woman I have such deep respect and regard for, Eisha Mason. Eisha is a practitioner, so we're both affiliated with the Agape International Spiritual Center, and Eisha has been a professional practitioner for 34, almost 35 years, which is quite an accomplishment. She is a teacher at Agape University. She is the practitioner's teacher. So when students begin to matriculate through the practitioner gateway, they will end up at the 2-year program, which is called Professional Practitioners. And Eisha is one of the lead teachers for that. She's been doing that for years. I've been at Agape for 21 years. And so Eisha has been affiliated with Agape for many more years. She is a wonderful person, a great practitioner, and a great teacher. And her just a little bit of her background. It's very extensive and impressive. She's also holds a degree as a spiritual therapist from the Santa Monica University called University of Santa Monica. And she was involved for many years, had a leading position at the American Friends Service Committee, which is the Quaker International Social Justice Organization. And that's just like the tip of the iceberg. And this past year, as many of you know, has been a watershed moment in terms of a reckoning regarding racial inequality and the police brutality that we've witnessed. And Eisha, inspired as she is, created a community healing forum for people to come together and really have a safe space to, as I like to call it, unpack their baskets of feelings and experiences regarding the deaths and the murders that we were witnessing. And this led to Eisha now has created a special class for the practitioners and ministers at the Agape International Spiritual Center that is called From Race to Grace, Building a Beloved Community. So being that I care so deeply about peace and love and humanity and our children and the next 7 generations, it felt so resonant for me to have a dialogue with Eisha. So I know I've been talking for a long time, it feels like, but welcome, Eisha. I'm so glad to be with you.
It's good to be with you. I want to clarify one detail because I want to be in integrity with my team. I have a master's degree from University of Santa Monica, and I'm licensed through Agape.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. USM is such a great school. So one of my questions for you is, it feels like this year people became more aware of the issues surrounding race in our society, which is kind of surprising, but what do you think? Why is it that systemic racism is not acknowledged?
Ooh, that's a big question, but one that I love. And it's a question that, well, I want to back up just a little bit. In creating this class that is for practitioners and ministers from any denomination, let me mention that. I worked with 13 of the practitioners who are serving as facilitators in this class, and we met for 12 weeks, every week, to explore the themes of this class and how we would actually pull this together into an amount of information that we could work with in 10 weeks. And as we worked on the theme of institutional racism, it was the most stressful, most emotional, most come to Jesus moment for most of us that have been working together for at least 6 weeks. So it's an excellent question of why is that so hard for us to face? I have been really a fan of a teacher named Thomas Hubel.
Yes.
Yeah, I just love his approach to this. And I think, and I want to just share a bit of his thinking about it because it captures what I believe. He says all of our trauma is not just ours individually, it's collective, that all of us are born into the trauma we've carried through our heritage, through our DNA, and the culture in which we live. But because that our cultures are not designed, do not accommodate that kind of exploration of consciousness and emotion, it's sort of a blind spot. And where the wound is most deep, we actually can't see, we can't process. It really becomes this impenetrable place to protect the owner of it from trauma. So my experience is that when we get into that conversation of institutional racism and we look at the profound impact of institutional racism in our country, and we look at the role, the how white privilege plays out in our country, it is such a painful confrontation that many of us are just, it takes a lot of preparation to begin to confront that. And yet we have this younger generation that are rising up, that for whatever reason are ready to take that on, ready to confront it. And I mean young people of every race and background. It's like they came here with that purpose to say, we're going to heal this and end this for the last time. Mm. And so I'm very encouraged, very heartened to see their courage and their boldness in taking that on. And my hope, I anticipate that is going to help more of us who are older to begin to see through a different lens and because we're all one, that wound within us is going to begin to soften and open so that we can really see what's right there in front of us.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I like Thomas. I like him a lot. And I love that idea of soften and opening. I think I may have mentioned to you that I am a certified trauma-informed nonviolent parenting educator, and I went through over 180 hours of training to achieve that, besides practitioner training and ministerial. So I really understand how difficult it is for people to recognize trauma, to acknowledge it, to process it, and to heal it. So one of the things that I found so valuable, of the many things I found valuable about first the Community Healing Forum, was the opportunity for people to have a safe space to express what was on their heart and to be seen and heard, which is such an invaluable aspect of healing trauma. It's just to have somebody witness it. And it's so similar to what we do as practitioners, right? Just holding space for somebody in a specific way so that they feel seen and heard. And I think one of the confusing pieces is that our society, the predominant paradigm for our society, is one that goes to blame. So, and finger pointing, and always looking for who's at fault. And when people have trauma and have intergenerational trauma, I think it really is an invitation through a class such as yours for people to learn how to hold that and to process their own.
Yeah, blame and judgment are just so convenient because you never have to look within yourself. You never have to do the hard work. It's just more effortless and in a way cheaper to blame someone else. But becoming spiritually mature requires that we build the capacity, build the muscles inside of our spirit and inside of our heart to be able to do that work of, well, what is my part in this? How am I participating in this? Because that's one thing that I do have dominion over. And that's one thing that I can change.
Mhm.
I rewatched a show on PBS called, the series is called American Experience. This particular episode is a documentary on the Freedom Riders in the South. And in the context of the work that I'm doing now, I saw it in a different way. This is recent history. This is the early 60s in America. For anyone who doesn't know, the Freedom Riders were both Black and white people who traveled interstate on buses in the South in order to break down segregation in public transportation, public transportation. And as they went through particular towns in the South, they were brutally, and I mean brutally, beaten,
Yeah.
intimidated. What I took from the film and why I'm mentioning it now is I could see the trauma in white people to be able to, and we think of trauma as the person who's obviously affected, people of color, oh, they must be traumatized by slavery and segregation, but to see the incredible violence in those people's eyes, it's like, oh my God, and this is carried from generation to generation. And there's no place in our culture to process it. Up until very recently, we didn't even understand how it works.
Yeah.
What I also saw in the film that was so made it bearable to watch was that there were these Black people who have been traumatized by living in the South and white people who have been part of the benefit, the privilege of racism and segregation, choosing differently, choosing a different identity.
Mm-hmm.
A different identity. Like, I'm not, Black people, I'm not going to be a victim. I'm going to be self-determining. And white people saying, I am not going to participate in this system. I'm going to bring it down. And we are forming the beloved community, literally through our blood. And so that one film just captured for me in this very graphic way, both the dangers of that collective trauma and the possibility when we're able to see and take responsibility for the world we want to create.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So in your class, is there a progression that you have created? Can you, I know that it's specifically for all practitioners and ministers, whatever the denomination. Can you speak a little bit about the progression of it?
Yeah, it was really hard to focus on what can we cover in like 10 hours. Like,
I know.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And so, so we decided to look at what is the role of spiritual leadership in challenging what we're seeing going on in the world, and the role of spiritual leadership in creating beloved community in our own spiritual centers.
Mm-hmm.
So that was part one. And then we decided what we can take on in this amount of time is what's required? What do we have to put in place? What conditions do we create? What practices do we begin to introduce into our community just to begin the work?
Mm.
In order to create that safe space for people
Mm-hmm.
to be able to do the hard work. What's the pre-work we need to do? And that's what we cover in the arc of the class, just talking about what holds us together. Like, there has to be something that holds us together when we're in struggle. And I know that some people in New Thought don't like the word struggle, but I think it can be noble. You struggle with your own inner belief system, your own inner healing. And it's powerful when we struggle together. So what holds us together? And then the next class begins to look at the challenges of just talking to each other. Our experiences, our point of view in the world is so different. How can we begin to communicate and truly see each other? The next class is just an introduction to institutional racism. And how that impacts us as groups. We move beyond the individual to the group? How does that impact people of color? How does that impact white people? What does it cost both of us, all of us? The next class, we're going to have an opportunity to look at what are New Thought leaders doing currently, what's already in action that applies all the things we've been talking about. And that class will actually take place right after the election. And then our last class is really about, so what are we taking on for ourselves individually and in our community? How are we going to be responding to what's in our society at that moment? So that's the journey that we're on together.
Wow.
And I just want to say, you can't get through that journey without a few tears. And maybe a lot of tears. But the 13 facilitators who went on that pre-class journey together were connected in a way now because we were willing to do that work together. Our connection now is really, we're part of a very private and unique club.
Definitely.
And it's one that we're welcoming our other facilitators and all of our participants, like, become part of that community, become part, because this is the work of the beloved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know I have been involved in what I call it sacred activism, because it's undergirded by spiritual principle and practices. And I've been involved in activism. I've actually been a sacred activist since I was a child, but when I became a mother, it added a whole nother level of what I didn't realize. I mean, I think many of us, if we look back in our lives, we've been activists. It's just people have a misconception about what activism looks like. And most specifically with the Million Mamas movement, I got involved in activism 6 years ago. And wow, so humbling. What an education. What an education. Unlike I never imagined I would have in my life. And continually I think about the Rumi quote, when the world brings you to your knees, you're in a perfect position to pray. And it really dovetails, like when I hear you talk about this and I hear you talk about spiritual leadership, this has to be part of your spiritual leadership. I mean, everybody's got a choice, but I think sometimes in the New Thought movement, there's this idea, my perception, that it's all rainbows and unicorns, and that we don't want to really, we don't want to really go down that path of talking about struggle, as you mentioned before, and how vital it is to spiritual evolution that we do acknowledge, because otherwise what's right, what's appearing, it's not the truth, but what's appearing is what people experience.
We talked about that a lot in preparing this class. And what I got clear about is all of the principles and the practice and the teaching, it all sounds good. And it's not, and our role, like why we have incarnated rather than stay in another dimension of pure consciousness, is to embody that.
Yes.
Embody that in the third dimension. That is the only way this kingdom of heaven on earth manifests, is through our embodiment of it. Yes. So Cornel West says, justice is what love looks like in public.
Oh my God, I so agree with that.
Justice is what love looks like in public. So I don't know how you love, and as in the story of the Good Samaritan, and how you walk by the stranger lying on the road. Because it's not really, the struggle, the person lying on the road, they have their struggle, they have their karma, they have the thing they're working through, but it's also about you.
Yes.
The person walking by. And a pop quiz for you about, well, so what's going on in your heart, and where is your consciousness, and how connected are you in the oneness? So for me, there is no tension, no struggle about that at all. The unifying place between theory and where we are and creating the vision is embodiment.
Yes.
You got to act. You have to live your faith.
Absolutely. So my next question to you has to do with helping people see what they don't want to see, right? So I've had some people say to me that racism is really a political apparatus. And I listen because that's what I'm trained to do. And I take it in my heart. And I then usually respond with, can you please explain that to me? Because I don't know where you got that information from.
And
they will usually quote something to me that has to do with the Democrats and the Republicans, and how there has been an intention by politics to keep people of color down, and that that racism doesn't really exist anymore, and they're not part of it. And I typically will look at them and say, perhaps you want to do a little more research. Perhaps you want to talk to more people, especially Black people. I honestly don't know what it's like growing up Black in America, but I know that I'm married to a man of color and I have a mixed child, and my father-in-law was a civil rights leader and activist. I've been at Agape for 21 years, so I know what my friends and loved ones experience. So perhaps you want to do some more research, as it were, to understand that what you're saying smacks of white privilege. And it also is indicative of how invisible systemic racism is.
What am I saying? I thought I was pretty savvy until recently, when I was again confronted with when I had to realize this enormous chasm that exists between white people in America and people of color and their experience of reality. And once I got over some tears about it and some rage about it, I just really deepened in my appreciation of this ingeniously evil system that can so completely insulate a group of people from what's going on right here. But it's designed to keep people ignorant and unquestioning. That's why for so many years and today it persists, this commitment to keep the races separate, because if you connect, you're going to start to see things that you didn't see before.
Right.
But also when people say it's all politics, or it's a hoax, or it's not real, or post-Obama, I think of this teacher, Jane Elliott, who's an elder teacher about race and diversity. And she does this process in a class of a mostly white audience. And people have said something like, well, I don't know about that. And she says, okay. So if you would be willing to trade identity, if you'd be willing to trade race, we're not talking about culture and music and dance. We're talking about your housing, your child's education, your educational opportunity. If you're willing to trade, stand up. And there's silence in them. Because I think even if people say, I don't know anything about that, that doesn't exist, confronted with that question, there's silence. So our work is to create safe spaces to begin to explore that blind spot and the wounding. You mentioned the community healing forums that we did at Agape earlier this year, which were interracial. And after we did 2 of them, I realized we need to do one that's just for Black people, because they need a space to not have to try so hard to accommodate someone else's feelings and process their own trauma. But I also thought, and white people need a space where they can process their feelings, their questions, their grief, their confusion, their judgment without worrying about somebody else judging. You know, where that work can begin to happen in safety. And then as each of us do some prep work, come back together with some skills, but a layer of pain that's off. Say, okay, we're in this together. If we're in the conversation, we've chosen to be in this together. Can we do the work? How do we do that work together? And so that's what, in this, coming back to this class, that's part of what we're talking about. A beautiful poem called Brave Space, not Safe Space, Brave Space. Beautiful poem. Or what are the practices of fierce vulnerability? Or what are the practices we want to have to create a learning environment? We need all those tools. How do we take care of our emotions? How do we take care of our body where those emotions live? We need all of those tools to be able to do this work together.
Yes. So I just want to drink that in. So powerful. So powerful. One of the questions that I was asked recently by somebody in a dialogue about this issue about race in America, race internationally, race in America, was, but I didn't have anything to do with it, and why do I have to defend myself, and why are Black people so angry with me? And I would love to hear your response to that, if you have one. I mean, it's a big question, so.
And her statement was, I didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, I'm not racist.
And I would, so those are, so those are 2, I want to address those 2 things.
Yes, yes.
So when you say, I don't have anything to do with it, but you benefit from it every day. And the person might say, no, I don't. I have this issue in my life, and I have this issue in my life, and I have this, and that's accurate, you do. But there's a whole set of issues you don't have just because you're not a person of color. So whether you invited it or you were just born into it, there's privilege you enjoy, there are benefits you enjoy. And if you don't begin to explore that, you're co-signing on it. I mean, maybe one reason some people don't know is because they don't want to know, because then you have to do something. You have to choose. And that's really scary. Mm-hmm. But for people who are on a spiritual path, you know, it comes back to, but don't you want to be free? Right. That's the bottom line. Don't you want to be free? This thing has got you in bondage. Don't you want to be free? Mm. And you may say, well, not that free. And that's fine. But be aware that you're saying
that it's a choice.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's one piece. If you are alive in America, you're in this game. You are in it in some place, and nobody is a bystander. No one. And so for people of color to face that day in and day in and day in and day in and day in, it's like for some people, they're just coming into this conversation now. For people of color, this has been our conversation every day we have lived in America, from childhood.
Yeah.
Every day. Every day, every day, every day. I can't say it enough. Every day I could put on a loop. And then someone says, really? That's maddening, because you haven't seen me. For however long you've been alive, you haven't been seeing me. And for a human being, with human consciousness, to not be seen is the most damaging thing that can happen. wounding thing that can happen is not be seen. So when someone says, but I'm not a racist, as Ibram Kendi has done a lot of writing about anti-racism, he says that you can't just say racist, not racist. Because if you're just saying I'm not racist, you're still benefiting. You're still, sitting at the table every day, reaping the harvest of racism, institutional racism. So if you are not racist, what you're saying is, I'm going to be an anti-racist. I'm going to be anti-racist, actively opposing those systems, those structures, those policies, those norms that perpetuate racism and inequality. And for many of us, that's a new thought. That's a new vocabulary. That's a new idea that's entering our culture. So you can't just sit it out. If you just sit it out, you're signing off on it. If you really are saying, no, I'm not part of that. That's not me. That's not what I choose. That's not who I choose to be identified. Then you're choosing to be anti-racist, which is active. It's active. It's embodying it. It's living it. Like Rabbi Heschel said, my feet were praying. My legs were praying when I walked with Martin Luther King.
Yeah, I wrote an Intervisions and I quoted him. And you did too. I saw yours as well. I love your Intervisions. And thank you for that. Thank you for saying that. It hurts my heart. I could start crying when I hear people make comments that reveal where they're at, and alongside of that is not the desire to look at it, but to make that declaration, like, I'm done. I don't have anything to do with it. And I do think about everything that I do. I always think about what's my part in it. I mean, it comes from my background in 12-step recovery. It's like, what's my part? I have, if I'm in relationship, I'm the common denominator in every relationship. So I may not have created the situation, but I have a part in it. I'm talking about beyond this conversation. So, I really relate to that. And I feel like I think that's a protective measure for people that don't want to really unpack that and look at that. So I can't.
Emotional capacity to do that, a certain level of, it's right with our spiritual teaching. You have to have a sense of your own identity beyond your thoughts, beliefs, actions in the past. You have to know you're more than all those things in order to be able to take this on. Now, it may not be come at you in a spiritual teaching, but some part of you has to be solid enough to say, oh, it's a thought, I can change that. It's a behavior, I can change that. It's a judgment, I can change that. As opposed to, this is who I am. People, like, you don't know what you don't know. Before, I worked in foster care for about 10 years, 12 years. Before I got involved, I didn't know anything about foster care.
Wow.
So maybe kids in foster care would say, how could you not know what's happening to us? Because that's what they live every day.
Yeah.
So I didn't know. But the choice point was, well, Eisha, now you know. What are you going to do? And that's it. Start there. Now you know, Eisha, what are you going to do?
So I think we should stop there. Now that you know, what are you going to do? Yeah. And for those that are watching our dialogue, so Eisha Mason created a class that is going to be held for 5 consecutive Saturdays beginning this next Saturday. And this particular iteration of this class is for practitioners and ministers of every denomination. you can go to www.agapelive.com and you will see the opportunity to register for this class. You can follow Eisha. Would you say on Facebook, Eisha?
Facebook, yeah.
Is there another way you want, if people are interested to contact you, perhaps they want you to come and teach this at their center?
Right, Facebook or my website, which is aishamason.com.
And that's EISHAMASON.com.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So Eisha, I can't wait to take this class. I mean, I know that's like, yeah, I'm like.
Trepidation, but we're calling it excitement and enthusiasm and passion. Yeah.
Yeah, I could feel in my body. So I was like, I can't wait to take this class. I'm like, well, I'm like, no, I'm up for the transformation. It's real. It's vitally important.
Let me just add, at this moment, when our country is we're at a real choice point here. We are right on the edge, tip this way, tip that way. What is a better place to be than with a group of people who have all said, okay, we're not perfect, but we're committed. You know, we have a vision and we're committed. We're going to work together to create it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bless you, bless you, bless you. Oh, my pleasure, my joy. I'm so inspired by you. So everybody, again, this is Eisha Mason, and I will leave the link to the class that she is teaching underneath. And please reach out to her. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Wendy Silvers. And I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to dialogue with you, Eisha, and to be with you for the next 5 Saturdays. So thank you for all you do to help create a beloved community and to help people rise up and heal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you Saturday.
I'll see you Saturday. Bye.